breaking my neck was the best thing that ever happened to me, you know.
I feel amazing, and I feel, you know, on top of the world, and nothing's a problem, and nothing can touch me, and you don't have to be racing to feel that.
And I hit this tree at absolutely top speed, and as can happen if you're a gentleman riding bikes, I hit myself somewhere I didn't want to hit. Immediately I felt like I needed to check said area, but forgot I had a head cam on at the time.
I was out there doing it, and if I messed up it was my fault, and the same as if I had success it was entirely down to me.
And our next guests need no introduction, but we're going to give them one anyway, so please welcome Team Atherton. Give them a big round of applause. You've got Dan, you've got Gee, you've got Rachel. I've got Mark Beaumont as well, so come on, sit guys. Great stuff. Here comes Rachel on there, nice and settled, brilliant stuff. So we've only got about 15 minutes, so we'll have a quick chat and then we'll open it up to you guys if there is time. But let's start with Rachel. Yeah, start ladies first and all that. Just check your microphone's working. Say hello.
Hi everyone.
Hey, brilliant stuff. World champ, how does that feel? Again.
Yeah, it feels amazing actually.
Is it better the second time?
Yeah, I think so.
Especially with the incidents you had in between and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, when you're young, it definitely, you know, when Gee and I won in 2008, it kind of just happened, and then, you know, obviously now it's sort of 5 years later, and it's taken a lot of hard work to get here. So yeah.
So when you go from here, once you've achieved that, do you have to kind of regroup, or is it a continual kind of right on to the next thing, on to the next thing?
Yeah, people, you know, everyone's like, oh, you can relax now, just enjoy it, but, you know, to be honest, this is probably the busiest time of year, coming out here and, you know, doing these bike shows and stuff like this. It's pretty cool, you know, everyone has given us such good support all year on Twitter and stuff like that, and it's, you know, it's nice to be able to come here this afternoon and meet everyone and say thanks for the support, so thank you everyone.
Do you find yourselves, when you're racing, you're much more in a bubble? Is this something you get used to, or, you know, is it something you have to kind of rethink and adapt to? Anybody? Talk to me, guys.
Yeah, I think when you're at a race, you know, World Cups especially, there's a big crowd there, but you're much
focused.
Yeah, you're very much there for the racing. You know, you're thinking about what you're doing. You know, you're warming up. You've got your routine, and you stick to that. But you know, when you come to something like this, you really, like Rach said, you get to meet all these people who are, you know, have been supporting you all year, and it's cool to see just how big cycling's getting, and you know how much support there is for the mountain biking.
So just quickly, how I'd like to just go along the line. How did you all get into cycling? Is it an accidental thing, or is it something that you kind of grew up with? I'd really be interested, just quickly along the line.
I think me and Rachel both say the same thing. You know, it's all down to older brother Dan here.
Big brother.
Yeah, he's to blame for it all.
So Dan, how did it work for you? We'll come back to Mark in a minute. You started the whole process.
Yeah, I'm sure like every other little kid out there, you know, we just used to live in a tiny little village in Devon. We actually lived. And
whereabouts in Devon was it again?
Near a place called Exeter. There was a little village called Kurzwell, and you know, the dirt jumps are still there now that we used to ride, and yeah, we used to go out before school on our bikes and kind of ride the jumps, and then leave the bikes at the jumps, and then get off the school bus and carry on riding. So just like every other kid, you know, it was just a way of entertaining ourselves.
And Mark, tell us how you got involved in.
Well, I started pretty normally playing football, like a lot of kids do in this country, and it just got boring for me, and I didn't like the competition. Being, you know, you'd come in and you'd lost, and someone had put the blame on someone else. And that for me was kind of like, oh well, it's not entirely, you know, you're there together. So a couple of friends were riding in my local town in Craven Arms, and just bought one of their bikes cheap, and started riding with them, and then that led to racing. And I'd liked that it was just down to me, and I was out there doing it, and if I messed up it was my fault, and the same as if I had success it was entirely down to me. So I like the individuality of it.
Yeah, but that's interesting because you've created a team ethic as well there, haven't you? And how important is that? Any of you?
Yeah, we all do help each other at events and stuff. as Gee was saying, at a World Cup we have different things that help us, like tick your box for that best result of the weekend, and I think that we all kind of buzz off each other and help each other with sections and lines and so on, and in little ways you do help each other, but then, you know, when those beeps start, it's down to you.
So Dan, just a quick chat to you about how the enduro season's gone for you, and how it is racing in that kind of environment.
Yeah, you know, this year's been the first year for the EWS,
yeah.
And Chris Ball and Enrico, those guys have done an amazing job. I think everybody expected it to be, you know, a super kind of cutting edge series, but you know, I think it's tough.
It's got to grow, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's got to grow, and I think it's tough for a sport to compete with the UCI Mountain Bike World Cup. You know, that is an amazing event. I'm sure all of you guys go on a Sunday afternoon and watch the finals, watch the World Cups, and there's just so much energy and so much, you know, electricity built around that race. You know, so.
But that's taken time in itself, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's taken years, you know, and also the British crowd as well. You know, Fort William this year, you know, it was amazing to see just how they got behind it, you know. But enduro will get there, you know. It's a growing sport, and I think you can learn a lot from downhill.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. And we see you all with your sponsors. You've got Silverline, GT, etc. How important is having those sponsors for you guys?
That's huge for us, you know. I think
is it the difference between success and failure?
it is, for sure. You know, we're racing to win a World Cup series, and you know, it's not just one race, that's a whole series, and you have to be surrounded by amazing people and the best people in the world to compete and to be the best. And for us, you know, we've got some amazing sponsors, people like Silverline and a lot of other guys, you know, really ready to believe in us and really ready to put the backing in there. And when we can win races and win championships, it's like a big thank you to them. It's like giving something back. But yeah, for sure, there's no way we could do it without them.
But I think, you know, on the other hand, I think for the youngsters getting into the sport, you know, the kids and everyone, you know, a lot of the time kids are like, oh,
too much emphasis on that, you think?
Well, you know, kids say, oh, you know, how can I ever get into racing downhill? My bike's rubbish, and you know, or I don't have any sponsors. And it's important to remember, you know, when you first get into a sport, you don't have to have the best equipment. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to have the best tracks and all this backing. You know, if you enjoy it and your mates ride and you can just go out, you know, like dancing after school and have fun, and that's when you grow all these skills, and that's when you know, you make yourself into a good rider. And it doesn't matter if you don't have, you know, all this support from everyone, because you've got to start somewhere, and we all started there. And, you know, we weren't born into this with all this amazing support. So
is that an issue, that there are too many youngsters trying to get sponsorship before they actually just get into it and let it happen?
No, I don't think so, because you know that drive to succeed. You know, kids want to make it to the top. They want to compete, and that's, you know, you need that drive. But at the same time, you know, it's not. You've got to put yourself out there, and you've got to believe in yourself before anyone else will. So.
Yes, Mark.
I think like a big point is just realizing why you do it, and for the sake, even for us, or for me, like there'll come a time where I'll be like, well, why am I really here? Like, I'm here because I love riding my bike and I love racing, and I think that's the bottom line. Is don't ever forget that, and kind of strive for, oh so and so gets this or so and so gets that. It doesn't matter. Like, you've got your bike and you ride it because you enjoy riding it, so that's why you continue to do it.
So what is it then for all of you about mountain biking, downhill, enduro, whatever it is, that floats your boat? What is it that really keeps you going and keeps you motivated? See? We should have got 4 mics. We've only got the one.
We've heard enough of Mark already.
Is it the competitivity?
Yeah, it is for sure. Yeah, I think especially when we're all racing against each other, you know, we're always kind of trying to outdo each other and trying to better the other one. I think growing up, me and Dan were always really competitive, pushing each other, not just with the racing, but with
everything.
Yeah, whether it was,
I can imagine that.
Whether it's trying a new jump or a new track, we were always trying to outdo each other, and you know, that helped push us on. And I think having that kind of competitiveness is always going to make you a good racer.
Anyone else down? No. 8.
What was the question.
What is it that floats your boat? What's the thing that still keeps you going every time you get on that bike?
Well, I think everyone in this room could answer that question. You know, coming to these sort of bike shows, you see the huge variety that mountain biking, you know, attracts from, you know, all through the spectrum, and I think everyone just will feel the same kind of freedom. And for me, when I ride my bike, and you know, I feel amazing, and I feel, you know, on top of the world, and nothing's a problem, and nothing can touch me, and you don't have to be racing to feel that. You can just be riding your bike, you know, at the local woods, and that's why mountain biking is so amazing.
Now, Dan, you guys have a lot of presence on social media, YouTube, that kind of thing. Is that important, or is it just a kind of a byproduct?
Yeah, I think that was a massive positive when Dan Brown, our team manager, joined Atherton Racing. You know, he came from surfing. You know, he had a lot of surfing background and skating background, and so he kind of looked at those sports and thought, what's cool in those sports, you know, and they were massively pushing the whole social media and the whole like making your own movies and showing it to the public sort of thing. So he started like a podcast, Atherton Racing Podcast, and it just grew from there. And now we work with Clay Porter, and Red Bull is such a key partner in that. You know, every single year we sit down and we look at, right, how can we make mountain biking look cool to the masses, and how can we like improve on what we did last year. So it is tough, you know, like I had like a month, 2 months getting up at like 5 o'clock in the morning to drive the digger for like the whole day and finishing at like 8, 9 o'clock just to build like that quarry line, you know. So it is tough, but you know, for us it's worth it for sure.
Final question for you all before I open it up to the audience. Obviously, Rachel, you had an incident in 2009 with a truck. Don't want to talk about it. Maybe you've all had injuries, you've all had incidents. How difficult is it to kind of to get going again when you've had those kind of issues?
Well, I think injuries are part and parcel of the sport. You know, it's an extreme sport, and that's why we love it. But you know, that means you're going to get hurt, and I think when you get injured, that's when you really understand how much it means to you. You know, I realised just how much I like riding my bike. You know, up until I got a bad injury, I thought that I was just in it for racing, in it for the winning. But when I got injured, I realised that, you know, I actually really love riding my bike, and you know, no matter how, it doesn't matter if you're racing, but I'll always ride my bike, and that to me is what an injury shows you, and so, you know, it's a blessing in disguise almost, because it brings it back to why you do it.
Creates the focus again.
Yeah, for sure.
So for all of you, any other answer on that one?
You had a bad injury, Dan?
Dan? Dan doesn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, I think Dan's had his fair share of injuries. And
absolutely.
I think that's helped me seeing how Dan's come back from them, because you know, I've had some bad injuries, but you know, it's been nothing compared to Dan. So that's kind of always shown me, no matter what I've done, if he can come back from what he's done, then I can do it too.
Dan, was there ever a moment when you thought, I can't do this anymore? Today.
Yeah. No, you know, like, I'm sure all of you have heard about Martin Ashton. He's sat up there now. He's had a pretty bad injury, and you know, everyone's like, oh, why don't you go and visit him? And you know, to be honest, that's the last thing I want to do, is go back to that hospital and visit him, and it just brings back so many memories, you know. And like Gee says, it's dark times, and but you do come out the other side. And for me, like now, breaking my neck was the best thing that ever happened to me, you know, because it gave me like a fresh lease on life. It made me focus on enduro. I stopped riding downhill, and you know, that's the way my life's gone now. So I think it's up to you. When you get injured, you got to look at your life and you got to think, right, what can I get from this that's going to make my life positive?
So you move on. Excellent. We've got 5 minutes, folks. If anybody's got any questions, I'm sure we have. We'll get the mics down to you.
What's your most embarrassing moment on a bicycle?
Gee, you on to this one? Gee's on to this one. Most embarrassing moment on a bicycle?
I would say it was recently. I crashed 3 weeks ago maybe, and I was in Canada. and I hit this tree at absolutely top speed. And as can happen if you're a gentleman riding bikes, I hit myself somewhere I didn't want to hit. Immediately I felt like I needed to check said area, but forgot I had a head cam on at the time. Subsequently, team manager Dan Brown gets the video online, and a few 100,000 hits later,
checking yourself out.
a lot of people have seen me with my shorts around my ankles.
Excellent. So you can check that out on YouTube if you so wish. Anyone else want to add to that one? Anyone else? You can't beat that, can you, really, mate?
I get pretty embarrassed if we're doing some filming and the people say, "Oh, could you just do a wheelie?" And I say, "Well, no, I can't do wheelies."
That's not what I do. That's fair enough. Not a stunt rider. A few more questions? Anyone else? Over here?
Yes, you have been to Cannon Chase by chance? The downhill track.
Mark's at Shropshire Lad.
Many years ago, we used to race there in the mud at the back of Dad's car, and then more recently I've done the, I can't remember what it's called, Follow the Dog, is it? The what?
The dog.
Smack the Monkey.
The what? Smack the Monkey? That sounds like something completely different. The Dog and Tree track.
The cross-country trail, I don't know, I did a loop for that one.
I think so.
I heard good things though, I heard there's some good trails there.
Cool. There are good trails, and that's a good point to make, isn't it? Because there are good trails everywhere now. It really is developing, and I know the National Trust are getting more involved, and there's more opportunities to ride kind of everywhere. Is that a fair point?
Yeah, definitely. There's obviously trail centres popping up everywhere, which makes it really accessible. You know, on any sort of bike, they have something for everyone at a lot of them. So I think that those kind of places are really good, and a good stepping stone for building mountain biking bigger and better.
I mean, cycling has, gone crazy in the UK in general. How much has that affected mountain biking and what you guys are doing? Have you seen the changes? Have you seen the effects of that? Go on, Gee.
Yeah, we have for sure. I think even within the last 5 years, you can see how much it's grown and how much support there is. I mean, what we do is, it's not covered on mainstream media. It's not like football or rugby, but the coverage it's starting to get is amazing, and how many people are following, say, the World Cup circuit now is awesome, and when we're racing, that's only a good thing for us. And I'm always stoked to see, the weekends, how many people are out on their bikes and how many youngsters are getting into it, and it's really inspiring for us to see that happening.
Brilliant. We've got time for one more question.
What I want to ask is, when you're jumping off an extremely high Red Bull jump, and it's all gone totally wrong, what goes through your head?
That doesn't happen to me.
Apart from when you're checking yourself out.
Yeah, I wish. Now, I think some crashes, you take off and you can see it's going wrong, and you can prepare. You think, if I can dive this way, I can dive that way, I can fall here or there, and then sometimes you take off and it's going wrong, and there's nothing you can do. I think my crash at Red Bull Rampage last year was one of those. I was in the air and I knew I was crashing, and there was literally nothing I could do. I was just kind of waiting for it, and sometimes you're fine and sometimes you hurt yourself. But I think we're all riding bikes and we're all gonna take those crashes, and it's just about making sure you get back on afterwards, I guess.
Okay, we are time up, but I think at the Silverline stand there is a signing happening with these guys.